Have you ever wondered how your sales performance compares against your competitors and peers? The B2B Sales Benchmark Report provides the definitive guide to what success looks like in 2021. See how you compare in terms of win rate, sales cycle, average deal value, relationships, and engagement. You can see the results and get the full report at ebster.com/B2B-sales-benchmarks. This is Sales Ops Demystified, the number one most downloaded podcast in sales operations. We invite the brightest minds in sales ops onto the show to deconstruct the what, why, and how behind rep productivity, forecasting, metrics, and all things revenue. This podcast is brought to you by Ebster, a revenue intelligence platform used to identify risk in the pipeline and score customer engagement, and is sponsored by the Global Sales Operations Association and the UK Revenue Operations Network. Hello and welcome to another extra special episode of the Sales Ops Demystified podcast. Today we're joined by Vera Skulteti, who is currently managing sales ops at a business called Yieldify. Now, Vera has extensive experience, 9 years, I believe, in sales operations at a couple of different places, and we're going to dig into that. Also, I would like to understand a bit more about Vera's finance background and how that has helped in the world of sales ops. So Vera, welcome to the show.
Hi, welcome everyone.
So first, let's go back and understand how you first entered the world of sales ops. And as I mentioned, I think I'm seeing a finance background. So was that the bridge into the world of sales operations?
Yeah, that's correct. I started off in finance. I did my BSc in finance and accounting in Hungary at the time. And I started to work as finance assistant and then become finance manager, kind of went through the ranks within finance and then become finance director. I think at the time it wasn't kind of a big thing being a sales ops manager or lead or anything like that, but somebody always had to pick up that job. I think just naturally somebody did it anyway. So at those organizations that I worked for, I started to do that. And I think it was just so, obvious to do it from a finance perspective, since, we were doing the commissions and looking at all the deals and how the ops are evolving and, how we could make it better. All the different processes, like finance is a very process driven sort of department, and I just feel like it just made sense and it happened organically, and it really did interest me. I think to begin with I really wanted to be in sales, but back then, especially in Hungary, because the situation was completely different when I grew up, it was kind of like we were in the last century, sort of a bit left behind, and so it was kind of not a high-profile position to be a sales manager at the time in Hungary. So that's why I decided to be in finance. But later on, I was just naturally kind of gravitating towards sales anyway. And so as I started to do all those like different analytics and all that stuff and realizing the importance of the processes that to be introduced into sales and not just go with like, oh, I had a great conversation with the customer, so, I did well and the other person didn't. So there's so much more to it. It can be very pragmatic and you can introduce those processes and ways of communicating. And as we know, all the sequencing and all the stuff we do these days is based on numbers and all the analysis that we do. Yeah, so that's really the short story of it.
That's the story. So it's quite interesting how many of the tasks that sales ops now does used to exist in other departments, but then this thing called Sales Ops formed, and it pulled out those things into this new ops team, which I think is quite interesting. But now I'd like to talk about, I think you've done Sales Ops at a few different organizations. Did you have similar like challenges in each of those different roles, or were all the challenges you experienced in those roles similar? Like did history rhyme or repeat itself?
That's a really good question. I think there's similarities and there's also differences at different organizations. In tech, which I've spent most of my career in, there's a lot of similarities. I did spend a couple of years in recruitment, which is, completely different. So there's different challenges within that industry and market. To start with the similarities, I would say is the data and the data quality and how people and the challenges of adoption, I think, of the different systems, since everything is built in the system, and then how you do the automation, how you do the adoption of the users, and how you kind of configure the UI, which then, help adoption or hinder. But then the similarities is the quality of the data is usually quite poor when you join an organization and try to organize all that, organize these things on the platform, and to improve that source quality. And I think that is just so important. And some people start to look at the more complex problems or processes and start to run before they can walk, right? And I think it's just it's very basic and it's really boring, and nobody really wants to engage with that because it's all the deduplication, it's all just looking for all the data, setting up all those reports where you can kind of check that data quality and where it stands. But then you can't really do anything without it. If you don't have accurate data, you don't really have the information. And it's quite hard to then go back to salespeople. So it kind of takes, I think, a personality as well to then be very friendly, amicable, and also have this sort of kind of respect, I would say, amongst them, because it's quite hard to have that with the sales team usually. And so I think that is the similarity. That is a big challenge. So when you join an organization, to kind of have yourself be accepted among those people who are already within that organization and have done things in a certain way, and to change that way, and then to make them understand that this is not just nitpicking, and it's not just something not a nuisance, not annoyance to them, but then showing them that this is what is the end result. And once you start to show that, this is very useful to you because this is where you're getting the results from, this is where you get your analytics, this is how you can improve in your job, and this is how you're going to, get through stages quicker, qualified leads quicker, all that type of stuff, then it becomes easier. But this is very similar across the board, I think.
Sure. So would you say that then every time you did move on to work with a new sales team, whether that was moving to a different role or moving to a slightly different sales team within the same organization, would you say that you got better at building those relationships each time, e.g. your your soft skills for influencing and adapting to teams improved?
Oh yeah, definitely. First, I think, especially because it comes with age as well and experience, first you try to go in a little bit aggressively. It's because you're young and you've got you've got very little experience in how to deal with people on occasion, and could kind of disregard other people's agendas or their situations. And then later on you get more understanding towards these problems or towards people, only because you've got all that experience behind you. Then you start this whole assimilation into new organization a bit better and be more understanding with different circumstances of people and organizations. And you also, when when you start within a new role or a new organization, you start to slow down. I feel like you start to have the confidence not to change everything immediately, not to try to look like you're having an impact from day one, but to then just listen, talk to people, listen to why they are doing things, because very often those things that doesn't make sense. When you start to interview people and find out why they are doing it in a strange way to you, it makes a lot of sense. So that's why I think it's quite important. But I don't know whether it just comes with age. If you can skip that sort of bit in the middle, I'm not sure.
Sure. Now here's a big question. Do you think that as a sales ops person, you develop more by doing one role for 10 years versus doing 5 roles in 10 years?
Do you mean if you stay within sales ops?
Yeah. So staying within sales ops, in both options, one option you stay in the same company for 10 years, and the other option you do 2-year stints at 5 different companies.
I guess they both can be really beneficial, because you might move, into higher positions throughout time, even if you don't switch companies. I am actually in a transition period because I have just accepted a head of sales ops role at a different company.
Congrats.
So thank you. So I need new challenge. I don't like it when, it stagnates. If I feel like I have done things and there's nothing new, and I'm a little strange in that way. I like change. I like new challenges. I like being pushed out of my comfort zone. And when I feel that I am in that, and I'm just repeating the same things over and over again, I do find new things to do and projects and everything, but I need a bigger change. I need constant challenge. So I think it's, I think it depends on your personality. You can improve a lot within one organization. It takes quite a bit of time, even in, when you get into senior positions as well. Even then, you need a certain period to then learn a lot about the organization, the politics, all those the links between people and how they operate. So it is quite time consuming to then change from one organization to the other. However, it does happen within the big organization that you're being transferred from one department to the other, and it's all the same really, because you have to meet new people. They operate differently, so it's quite hard to tell. But I think both of them got their ups and downs. So yeah.
Sure. So I think what my understanding of the first part of your answer was that you're saying it isn't necessarily the role which will help you develop, it's more the challenge. And you can be challenged in one role, let's say if the company is growing really fast or you get to move roles, just like you could be challenged in multiple roles, but it's not necessarily the fact that you had multiple roles, it's more that with a challenge in those roles. Would you agree?
Yeah.
Amazing. Cool.
Yeah.
And also congrats on the new role. So because your current title is Sales Operations Manager, and now you're going to lead a team.
Yeah, that's right.
That's great. So here's a big kind of question I have in my mind about sales ops. And I think his interview, we're coming up to 130, right? So he's been in my mind for a while, Vera. Do you think that could we split sales ops into a half, where we have one half of the role is essentially coming in and firefighting, dealing with issues, and then the other half is doing improvement, proactive improvement projects. And do we have some sales ops roles that are just doing firefighting and some doing improvement projects? And so in your experience, have you been doing both, or was one role doing more of one of those than the other?
I have been doing both, but I'm on the same opinion as you are. I think it should, well, I don't know whether you said it should be or it could be, but I think it should be split to a certain extent. These two roles should, if it was split, they should definitely talk to each other and look at each other, because what a person is, if we split it, well, one person is firefighting, is that what the other person should be improving on? Because very often, the tickets are coming through and it's about the same problem over and over again. And if that problem is not being resolved by some certain automation or process changes, then obviously that person is always just going to be firefighting the same thing. But it's very difficult to do the same, to do both at the same time. And I know that by experience, because very often what you would want to do is introduce improvements and talk about those things. Well, me at least, because the other one is a little boring. So you would want to implement those improvements and make good, like, positive changes. But you're just so busy doing the day-to-day and dealing with the tickets. Now, if there's only one person, which is quite often the case in small organizations, then you have to put some extra time in there when you're doing the improvements and you're also dealing with the request, because you kind of get into this vicious circle that, oh, I'm just dealing with this and I never have time to make the improvements, which then results in more and more tickets. So what I have been doing is that, allocating some extra time in the evenings to then make the improvements, which would then reduce the request. But if it's possible, or there are resources that let companies hire more people and split the role, I think it would be a great idea.
Yeah.
And very often it doesn't have to be a very experienced sales person to deal with tickets. Because more often than not, they're about the same thing. Well, very similar things, or a couple, like there's 5 different things, and like all of them are about the same.
It makes sense. It's almost like if a graduation, you can get to the improvement work after you've come in, and for 6 months you've been doing the firefighting work. So that's quite an interesting. It's quite an interesting strategy. Awesome. Now, I'd like to ask you about predictions for the future of sales ops. Are you seeing any trends or any new ways of doing things within sales ops that you think are coming within 2021?
I haven't really seen new trends. I can see that there's, probably this role is evolving and is needed. I see a lot of role advertisements, and I get approached quite often on LinkedIn as well. So, that's just my personal experience, which, didn't used to happen that often. Maybe 2 years ago, it might be just, because I've got more experience now, but it also definitely is that companies are realizing that they need this position since their finance department's got to focus on something else, or salespeople need to focus on selling and etc. So they don't really want to just hand it over to a person piling some more stuff up on them. And people talk to each other within the industry. If we're just like looking at tag, I know so many people with moving around, and they moving around as well, and we meet up again in different companies, and people talk to each other about their experiences. So sharing all those experiences, how it goes with like a sales ops person, what it's like if they have a head of sales ops or a sales ops manager within the organization, and how they can, help improve and get better at these, tracking KPIs or improving their processes. And I think people have recognized, organizations and CEOs, that this is such a crucial position for that, to not to just introduce new processes, but push it through, implement it. And so it's going to be reality, not just kind of a good to have, and then, stuck in the same kind of rut at all times, because there's nobody to then implement it, push it through, make it work. I think it's just like having that kind of go-to person as well improves the quality of communication between different departments. I'm sure you know, there's some friction between different departments, and this role is also helping that. And I think this is definitely part of that, added to the benefit of a salesperson not having to go to the finance department, because there's like there could be a lot of conflict between them for known reasons, and it's kind of like lightening that kind of conversation, or understanding both parties and then communicating their needs in a better way.
Sure.
So all of those things, I think, is kind of helping this position to thrive, and it will be needed, because we are the ones who are showing that, you know, all the CRM systems, like, still, you know, it's only really just started that companies are looking at implementing all these systems that will help them operate. So many small and medium organizations are still working off Excel files, and you know, it's just can't be the case anymore. They won't be able to keep up with all that happens, especially, you know, with all the digital transformation that kind of happened so quickly as a result of COVID now. But we knew it before as well. You know, it was kind of like creeping up on us, but now it just happened all of a sudden, and nobody can communicate in other way, because we're all like sat in our office at home. You have to get on, you know, the Zoom calls. You have to use like G Sheets. You have to use CRM, so you know what's happening. Otherwise, you're on the phone nonstop and trying to figure out what's happening within your organization, or with your colleagues, or with your contacts and clients. So yeah, I think it's gonna be thriving for sure.
Sure. And I'm not sure if you're moving on to the new role, or you will still be the current role in Q4, but what will be your single biggest sales ops priority during this quarter?
So within the new position, I'm going to have to focus on sales enablement, and I'm going to have to focus on, you know, the SDRs. So I'm actually reading quite a lot about it, because the current organization has been around for about 11, 12 years. So it's kind of in that stage where it's no longer a startup, it's a small organization, it's growing really quickly. We're hiring a lot of people, but there's, you know, set processes. There's always room for improvement, obviously, because, you know, things are moving fast. But it's kind of trying to retain customers and obviously acquire as well. But the retention is the most important part of it. Now, in my new role, it's going to be the acquisition and sorting out, you know, those databases and prospecting and sequencing. So I think first and foremost, I'm going to have to focus on that, which is a big shift if you think about it. It's completely different focus within, you know, Salesforce. We're going to be using Salesforce there too. I have been using that for years and years. So, you know, I'm very familiar with that. But now I'm going to focus on leads rather than the Service Cloud. It's more like Sales Cloud and kind of figuring out, and especially because leads is a bit of a funny one in Salesforce. So I'm trying to kind of find a good way to deal with it, like to build that part out. I haven't been very happy with that in the past. So I'm just kind of started to read a lot of books about how to deal with sales leads and how to set them up and the different stages to move them within that early period, and the qualifying criteria. So yeah, just all that is going to be a different challenge.
Sure. And then the final question is, who in the world of sales operations would you most like to take for lunch?
I've got a friend called Andrea Kelly. She works for Amazon, and she's an amazing sales ops person. I'm fortunate to be able to pick her brain every so often, so I'll take her for lunch and then talk about this new position for sure.
Amazing. Vera, thank you so much for your time. I can really tell that you are extremely passionate about the role. And I'm super excited to see the next role you have and to see how you progress in this world, because it's clearly like it was made for you, it seems.
Thank you very much. I really enjoyed our chat.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Sales Ops Demystified podcast. If you are listening on a podcast listening application, then please subscribe, rate, and review. And if you have any questions about the show, if you know a guest, or if you have any questions about sales operations, just hit me up at tomhunt@ebster.com. That's tomhunt@ebster.com.